Welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Justin Stoddart. Very excited today to talk about change. Like the reality is each and every one of us, to achieve the level that we want to achieve and that we can achieve, we have to change. We have to get better. However, there are certain ways to go about it that may take you decades. There are other things that we're going to share today that are shortcuts to change. Things that are going to help you get the change that you need to stay ahead in your career, to stay ahead in your industry, that won't take as long as you figured it out yourself. I've got with me two experts that are going to help us with that today. Before I get into that, I want to remind you that we'll take snippets of this show and we'll put it into the Think Bigger Real Estate group on Facebook so that you can take the implementable portions of this and really implement it into your life and your business. So be sure, if you're not yet a member of the Think Bigger Real Estate group on Facebook, go do that now. And again, back to today's guest. One has been a longtime friend of mine, Kevin Holtzman, been a very successful real estate agent here in the Portland market, and has built a boutique brand called Pacific Grand. He's done a great job with that. And then a gentleman who I'm just getting to know, who I have tons in common with for all kinds of reasons, Erik Van Alstine, and I'm grateful to have you here, both of you here. Erik, for those that don't know, is a leadership consultant, strategist. Really has developed an entirely new way of thinking about change that we're going to introduce today. He's been writing for the past 15 years on a very regular basis and has massive amounts of really intelligent content to be able to share and some insights that are really groundbreaking. So again, with that long, bloated introduction that didn't even do you guys justice, I want to thank you both for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Total pleasure, guys. Total pleasure. So, Kevin, you obviously lived the life of a real estate agent. Erik, you grew up with parents who were real estate agents. Let's just cut to the chase. What are some of the biggest challenges that you feel like face real estate agents that then we're going to address today?
Yeah, I'll take on that first. But one of the biggest things, obviously, for anybody getting in is the adjustment to the reality behind the process of work and what it actually takes to be successful versus the perception of going into it, right? So there's a pretty big learning curve there, but when you put yourself around really solid education and training and continue in that path, I think the next biggest hurdle that people are faced with is the sustainability aspect of, building the business that will ultimately run itself, but then, continuing to build upon and managing a lot of the conflict that arises basically on every single transaction that's out there. So those are some of the two things right away that come to mind. And obviously, we're here to talk about some ways in which to mitigate that and set people up for success for the long term.
Yeah,
I'm right there with you too, Justin. I'm just talking about, consistency, agree, and the challenges of working with clients. I definitely understand that from the inside as being part of a family of realtors, as well as just understanding how we make things change, how we can really succeed long term.
Both of you mentioned some things that I want to just kind of touch on, maybe solutions or problems that we're going to find solutions to today, or at least start down that path of introducing a solution to it. Kevin, you mentioned all the different variables, right? Every transaction is so different. It's not like you can completely automate this process because each client, each situation, each transaction is so different. And I do believe that creates a lot of challenge and the need to be able to continue to grow, to be able to be the person that clients continually turn to help overcome all those differing variables. Erik, you talked a little bit about the consistency, right? I see agents, I know you experienced this even growing up, that you'll have certain agents that start to get a good thing going, right? Their business will start to really excel. And then they either take their foot off the gas and or go blow all the money, right? Go spend it on a really fancy car. Obviously, there's some challenges in being entrepreneurial in the real estate industry and having some of those tendencies and weaknesses. I'd love to hear you guys talk. And again, one thing that I didn't mention as I was introducing you is this program or this new kind of thought thread that you've really developed, Erik, which is Perceptual Intelligence. I'd love to have you kind of speak a little bit about how that can help real estate agents solve those couple of problems of like being able to continue to grow, to be that person that solves all those problems, as well as being the person that can create consistency. Because I know both from an income standpoint, as well as a workflow standpoint, as well as a work-life balance standpoint, consistency is something that people really, really struggle with in this industry.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think we have something that can be very helpful when it comes to solving those problems. Perceptual intelligence is something that evolved for me over many, many thousands of hours of writing about the psychology of leadership, psychology of influence. What does it take to make changes? I've been an entrepreneur for 30 plus years, CEO of a company, of a multi-million dollar company right out of the gate in college, 7 years out of college. Grew that from a desk beside the bed in my little apartment in Seattle up to 80 plus employees, and you know, had a good amount of success even in my late 20s. And quickly realized that there's a lot more to leading change in a company setting than I knew. I was definitely green, very young. But then you started to just think about the concept of change in general. Why is it so difficult for a salesperson to pick up a phone and make a call? Why is it so hard for people to get along and solve problems? Why do we deal with so much drama? I mean, talk about drama. Trying to close a real estate deal between a buyer and a seller, I mean, you can run into buzzsaws left and right there. So you're talking about all the stuff that I've dealt with as a business leader, all the stuff I've dealt with in family life, and heard from my parents and its challenges, and spending a lot of time really thinking deeply about how change works. I've discovered this concept of perceptual intelligence. And it's simply understanding the nature of perception, meaning the way we see self, others, situations in life, and how that automatically influences our emotions and then our motivations and our behaviors. When we can identify the root causes of these emotional, motivational, behavioral issues and make changes there, we can be much more effective. In fact, I titled the subtitle of my first book is called New Power for Change in Work and Life. So new power to change these things by going to the root level, dealing with problems at the perceptual level, meaning the way we see, not just the way physical sight, but the way we imagine, the way we assume, the way we add stories to the facts of our experience and come up with something playing on the movie screen of the mind, and what that means then for accelerating change. So yes, absolutely. There's some powerful things that we can offer that help people persist. Like, how do you stick to it and do the small things that add up to the big things? And then how do you deal with the problems of resolving conflict and just handling, you know, being able to strap in and hold, survive the ride to the finish line of a closing sometimes, and disappointment and challenges all along the way when things don't close and things don't go the way we plan. So very powerful things for that, and I'd love to unpack that a little more.
Yeah, let's. I'm eager to do that because again, you pointed out some really interesting things. Is there? I think as kind of entrepreneurially minded people, we tend to be very good at starting things, not always good at finishing things. Right? There's this concept of kind of big vision, excitement, lots of ambition, but when it comes to the details, or when it comes to persisting, as you mentioned, through the buzzsaw, I love that term, of a difficult transaction, it gets hard to then want to also strap on the boots and go out and do it again when you just got paid well to do this transaction. It's like, you know what, I'm going to take a break. And all three of us know that most of the fuel is spent when an airplane is getting up, getting ready to take off, right? Mm-hmm. And so if all of a sudden that plane gets up in the air, it doesn't have to expend as much fuel. The problem that we all see, and sometimes even experience, is that as soon as that plane gets off the ground, we want to try and land it again. We need a break, right? Our entrepreneurial selves are like, whew, that was difficult. So we either want to go start something else, try a new method. Whereas what I hear you saying, Erik, is that if we would just get good at changing our kind of core self to be more consistent, stick with things longer, and be able to persist through all the different variables that come to us in this industry, we'd be much better served, right?
Oh yeah, I think we tend to think. I think we tend to look at success and change as something that can happen in these big leaps, right? Like we think if we can do one small thing in one powerful way, then all of a sudden we'll succeed. And we tend to overestimate the amount of things that we can accomplish in a short term. Let's say in a day. So my wife gives me a to-do list on a Saturday. I think, oh, this is going to be no problem. I get halfway through the list by the end of the day, I'm exhausted. And it can easy to get discouraged with that because we tend to think we can do more in the short term than we really can. So we have this false view of our own ability in the short term. And that tends to make us disappointed, right? We tried, didn't work out. So we tend to kind of come back and and scale our ambitions back, reset our expectations. And that, by the way, is a good idea in the short term. But in the same way, we tend to overestimate what we can do in the short term. We massively underestimate what we can do long term with consistency. So, for example, someone thinks, there's so many people who want to write a book. You look at these top goal sites. I think there's 123 Goal or goals23.com. There's this list. Thousands of people are saying they want to be able to write a book, but very few people do, because writing a book isn't about locking yourself in a cabin for a week and write and hashing it out. It's really about the daily grind of getting words on paper. So I think in the same way, in real estate, think about this. In real estate, it's the daily disciplines. It's the little things that we do every single day that are just going to happen no matter what the day is like, no matter how we feel, no matter how motivated we feel or not. If we can chip away at those fundamental things, you guys in real estate, you know that every business, everybody has their own criteria for what it means to win the day, to win the week, to win the month, to win the year. And so you know what those things are. Those aren't something new. But what's new is the power to be able to see how those things add up over time. When we see our own ability long term, we tend to underestimate our ability. When we see our ability short term, we tend to overestimate. So we've got to figure out how to downplay the expectation of what we'll do in a day and play up the expectation of what we can accomplish in a consistent year, a consistent 5 years, a consistent 10 years. I've seen my mom do this in real estate in Vegas and just thrive long term, because she just knows what it takes to do the little things every day to make her business win.
Such profound insight here. I remember listening to a mentor of mine speak from on stage, and he talked about, very similar to what you're saying here. I absolutely love what you're saying. Is that if we could take a look at the cheeseburger we're about ready to eat, and if we knew that cheeseburger, like as soon as we ate it, like we'd have cardiac arrest and we would die, we would never eat the cheeseburger, right? But we don't think in that long of horizons of time. We're like, I got time to fix it. I got time to fix it. The reality is those decisions compound on each other, and we end up right down the road being in a physical state that we don't want to be in. And what I hear you saying, and I've actually heard you say this before, is that like thinking bigger to you, right, is thinking longer of like, what are these actions compounded over time going to do for me or not for me, right?
Yep. Yeah. Human nature is to see the short term, but not see the long term. And I think when you're talking about thinking bigger, absolutely, thinking longer is a way of thinking bigger, or thinking wider is a way of thinking bigger. Thinking higher and lower as well. You can tell I've been spending way too much time thinking about thinking bigger, but definitely we tend to think short term. So and here's another thing too about just apathy versus motivation. We feel apathy, which is a lack of emotion or motivation, because we don't see the dangers or we don't see the opportunities. So when we fail to see the relevant dangers and opportunities in the immediate decisions we're making, we can't feel the urgency. We have no motivation to act, as opposed to seeing the long-term impact of eating that cheeseburger. I mean, I've even heard other people say, hey, if that cheeseburger could slap right on your rear end or on your thigh and turn into what it's gonna be in a few years, you would never eat it. But you don't see that because you're just thinking about today. And you know what? Here's the truth. Cheeseburger is good right now. Good now. Very bad later, but good now. And we only think about now. We don't think about later. So when it comes to motivating, we've got to figure out how to look long, not only at the opportunities, but also the dangers. Because contrary to a lot of motivational beliefs, fear is an extremely powerful motivator. We should use it. And I was talking to you earlier about a realtor friend who used to earn these big commissions in November and think nothing of taking all the rest of the year off, doing things, just enjoying their life. And come January, February, all of a sudden, just their life crashed down because they weren't doing the things that were going to lead to a January, February, March success. And now they're struggling. Well, people who look forward just far enough to January, February, March, and see the danger of not doing the things they need to do now, will be motivated by that, what I call useful fear, right? Useful fear versus useless fear. Useless fear is when we imagine things to be harmful that aren't. Useful fears when we imagine things to be harmful because they are going to be harmful and we take steps to avoid them. So we'll be highly motivated by looking long, seeing the dangers, also seeing obviously the opportunities, and letting both of those break apathy over our lives, motivate us to do the small things.
You're giving some great context to this concept that you developed, which is the perceptual intelligence, right? Being intelligent enough to perceive all the ramifications, not just the ones that are going to hit us today, right? Like if we knew that we had, like, that we would get a belly ache, right? That actually wouldn't feel good. And we'd actually get like sick. We probably wouldn't eat the cheeseburger, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. It actually tastes pretty good. And like we talked about, like the actual impact doesn't come till way down the road. Kevin, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, you've been kind of in the game, in the trenches, building a real estate brokerage and company. How do you see these things showing up, and like what benefit would they be to somebody in our industry that struggles with consistency?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I look at overall what we do and how we're helping people, and I'll use kind of Tiger Woods as an example, right? One of the greatest golfers of all time, but really known around the world as one of the toughest mentally of all time. And so he had daily training, not only the physical ability to swing the club, but the mental capacity to train his brain to eliminate all of these false sabotage, these false identities about himself, and break through a lot of what mentally holds people back. So when you look at from one side of what we do and what we offer through the online on-demand, really 19 courses that we teach through this, is that we're coming alongside not only individuals and executive teams, but really the entire staff of all organizations to help train and coach and be in really a long-term commitment with one another to help train them how to think and develop a mental toughness in which, the physical attributes in putting together, the marketing plans, all of that stuff is a set of training. We come, what Erik says, it could be over the top from a mindset, but really it's always from the root level, in which we're developing people to be very strong, to endure some of the most challenging things that come at us mentally, which make us want to stop, which make us want to, create excuses for things as to why we can't do them or why things are going to be different. So that's really kind of my 2 cents. And, there's so much depth to this that I just kind of want to vomit all everybody and tell you everything I know. It's inside my head, but it's one of those things that when you have someone who's coaching you alongside from a mental standpoint, from a perceptual standpoint, my goodness, does it ultimately break free from, yes, all of the work things and the goals that we're trying to achieve, but ultimately it naturally flows into the personal life with friends, family, and everything else changes from there.
Really interesting. Great comments. I'd love to hear, obviously you guys have 19 courses, I heard you say, right? And kind of a deep dive on how to change. And I think, again, people are typically looking for silver bullets. They're looking for magic pills, and they get disappointed when those only last for a few days, right? And they don't actually cause us to change. One of the big things I'm a proponent of is that you're actually going to have to get better as the competition stiffens, as downward price pressure continues to occur as a result of big tech coming in and telling your clients that maybe they don't need you like they used to need you, then you're going to have to get better, frankly. Yet all of us are looking for a faster way to do that. My question to you guys, if obviously we can't cover 19 courses worth of material, but if today's, those that are watching this could take away something to help them to think longer, right? To think in kind of longer horizons of time, what would be a tip to at least get them started and maybe even whet the appetite on what your organization could do for them?
That's a great question. And definitely we're talking about a deep dive, but a very rewarding dive. In fact, it was funny that my editor, when my first book came out, he says, you definitely don't have the same problem as most authors that I run into. Most authors I run into need a little bit more support for their book. They've got about maybe 30 pages of good content, and somehow I got to stretch that into 150 pages. You, on the other hand, have about 300 pages of good content. I got to get that down. So I said it was a great benefit because you've thought through this so much and long that we could eliminate 2 out of the 3 illustrations because you've thought this through so well. So what we're talking about is something that's definitely thought through, definitely a deep dive. But I think the bottom line is we can always look back to the way we see ourselves, others, and our situation is either going to affect us constructively or destructively. In fact, I even hate to talk about positive emotions as being good and negative emotions as being bad. The better way is to frame constructive versus destructive. The truth is there's a constructive and destructive element to every single emotion. Positive emotions like, for example, love. It can be constructive, but it can also be destructive when you love the wrong things. Let's say you love heroin. That's destructive. So it's love, but it's love that's not going to get you a constructive outcome. So it really is talking about ways to think constructively, ways to see self, others, and situations constructively so that we can have the most constructive emotional, motivational, behavioral outcomes from that. So when we're talking about this issue of upping our game, tightening market, I think there's 2 ways to see this one as well. You could see yourself as falling behind the pack, or you could see yourself as embracing the challenge, upping your game. The truth is people are happier when they tackle challenging goals. If things are too easy, we get bored of them and we quit. It's why we quit playing checkers when we were 8 years old. Checkers is too easy. It's too easy a game to keep our attention. But when the game gets harder and it's tougher, we tend to rise to it. And I think we're happier as a result. So it's just like one example would be, how do you see the market for real estate? Do you see it as, your inevitable demise because of outside forces? Or do you see this as your opportunity to up your game, to get stronger, to get wiser, and to get at it? Now, if you see it the second way, you're going to have high motivation. You're going to lean in. You're going to develop yourself. You're going to become something great. If you see it the first way, you're going to be discouraged. You're going to eventually fail out of the system. Or fail out of the industry. So it really does boil down to how you see even the situation. Is this an opportunity to meet a challenge and thrive? Or is this my impending doom subject to all kinds of other outside forces? Has an impact.
Yeah, well said. I think there's anybody who recognizes that disruption equals opportunity is probably is going to be on the right side of the equation, as opposed to being a casualty of it. Rather, you can be an opportunist of it and see how you can take advantage of that opportunity. I love it. Kevin, any additional thoughts from you?
Yeah, Justin, I'll just share kind of 3 points, 3 takeaways from today that are really 3 core takeaways from these immersion trainings that we do that are nearly 2 days worth of work all together. And these 3 are, number 1, to get completely and totally free from yourself, right? That's kind of eliminating these useless fears, every imagined inability, and these destructive blindness that we have in our lives. The second thing would be to be completely fulfilled, to fulfill the full potential within ourselves with wisdom and purpose and optimism and even love, right? And the third and final thing here would be to live, honestly, completely immune to the destructive relational influences in our life, and learn how to handle and professionally, just transformatively and building a mindset that we can automatically influence the things that we do.
Powerful concepts. Kevin, tell us a little bit. I know you're doing something here pretty soon to really help individuals, small teams, even those that work within large organizations, to start to implement some of these tactics, some of these strategies, some of these principles. What would you how would you direct people to kind of learn more about this? Because I think all of us, including myself, are looking at this saying, like, there's no doubt I need to change. Like, there's absolutely no doubt about it. If there's a shortcut to doing that, then I want to know about it, right? Because the reality is, like, these magic pills, these magic bullets aren't going to work. But if I can have something that works on me faster than me trying to figure it out myself, And I'm interested. I think there's a lot of people kind of saying that. So what would you say would be, the best way to learn about what you've got coming up?
Absolutely. The first thing I'll say is that, a shortcut to mastery really doesn't exist. There's roughly around 10,000 hours that someone needs to apply in any particular vocation in order to, quote, master that space, right? So there's one thing here that people have to understand. Then they commit to anything, let's commit for the long term. The shortcut is really going to be the amount of time and space that you don't waste by hopping and jumping into all these different things, but rather sit down, focus, and really get in tune with something that's going to change your life. The second thing that's coming up in really the end of first quarter 2021 is that we're going to be promoting, and we have pre-registration right now, but we're putting together a business retreat in Corbett, Oregon at a newly renovated Crestview Manor. It's about a 50-acre compound out there. So it's going to be a full-on 2-day retreat, meals included, lodging, plus we're going to sit down and go through, and it's going to be a true training for this overall automatic influence course in which everybody will walk away from that changed and potentially mind blown. So lots of more information to come with that, but the website, I'm sure Justin will link it in, but it's LCG, that's Leadership Council Group Network.com, and there'll be more information there, along with Mr. Erik and everything else that we're in partnership with, and his resources that can just stack each other.
I put that up here in the show notes already. I would encourage anybody, if you feel like you want to change faster, like that you realize that for you to stay ahead, you've got to get better, you've got to get more consistent, I would really encourage you to take a look at this. I want to thank both of you so much for this opportunity to get just kind of a sneak preview of the difference that you're making in the world. I'd love to hear both of you, if you wouldn't mind answering the signature question of the show, which is this. Each of you are big thinkers. And I would love to hear what you do to continue to be a big thinker, to continue to expand your possibilities. Kevin, let's start with you, and then let's end with Erik.
Absolutely. I think your influence, the people around you have such an influence. And so to be a big thinker and to continue to think big is, of course, setting yourselves around the right environment, around the right people. And that can be a combination, right? Those who have been there and done that, where you want to be, a select few that are kind of in the same position with the same amount of passion that you have going in that path, like those peer council groups, things like that. And then, ultimately for me personally, it's just a relationship with the good Lord, to have, an understanding that my life is purposeful and that everything that I do is going to, in one way or another, benefit and help others in this life outside myself. So those are three things.
Good stuff, Kevin. Thank you. Erik, what would you say? What do you do to continue to be a big thinker, to continue to expand your possibilities?
Well, I love the analogy of thinking bigger in terms of, they always say it's a little bit cliche, but thinking outside the box. But I'm imagining myself in a box right now. And if I wanted to expand that box, I would move it higher, I would move it longer, I would move it wider, and I would move it deeper. Mm-hmm. So let's talk higher, thinking higher. When you go out to these places that Kevin is talking about in Oregon for a 2-day summit, I don't think it's not an accident that they call it a summit. A summit is a high place that you climb to in order to get a bigger view. That is why you go to these places, to escape the forest or the trees that you're so caught up in of the daily life. And you can get up there and you can look down on your life and things that really matter the most. You can get that high view. So that to me is thinking higher. And I really focus regularly on taking breaks and giving myself the ability to think higher. We talked about thinking longer already, so I'll cover that. That doesn't need any coverage. Another is thinking wider. We tend to think in terms of our narrow self-interest, and we fail to see the wider implications of what we do. What we do impacts other people, not just us. It impacts society and culture, not just us. And so I tend to try to embrace the wider view. And then obviously thinking deeper, to me, is spending more time focused on the full realities of things, of being able to look out at my life and my look out at my yard and to look out look at my family and to see them as they are in their depth, and not just to gloss over things lightly, but to see the profound goodness in all these things that are around us, including ourselves, and just be grateful for that. And so that would be my way of thinking bigger. I'm busting that box out high, low, and on each side.
It's a powerful concept, right? Yeah. Instead of thinking outside the box, just you create the box, make it as big as you want, deeper, wider. I love it. What a different perspective, and really kind of gives you power when it's tough to get outside of the box because of whatever reason, right? Like, who said the box needs to be a certain, a certain shape or size? It's a great kind of paradigm to consider. So thank you so much, both of you, for contributing, for being big thinkers and being people who I want to be around, so that I can continue to expand my possibilities. And I know my audience feels the same way. I thank you on their behalf. So anyway, with that, we'll end. And with my final request to everybody listening today, first and foremost, go to lcgnetwork.com. Take a look at what Kevin's putting together. This summit, as Erik described, allow you to get a different, bigger perspective on where you're at and where you ultimately want to be. And then the final request is this, which is to go think bigger.